Yeah, the hat is back because I am feeling a little bit sassy, and also it is not 120 degrees in the studio today, so that always helps. Hey, party people. Today I want to talk to you about the ugly truths of opening your own fashion brand. If you didn't know, I do private consulting for anyone who watches this channel, really. And I'll drop the Calendly link in the video description below, but you can book one-on-one Zoom time with me to talk about your portfolio, your business idea, the continuation of your business, the next collection in your business, design-oriented stuff, product development, kind of startup stuff is my jam. And I want to get rid of some preconceived notions, these ideas floating on the internet about starting your fashion brand, because there's nothing I hate more than a bunch of uninvested people going on and on and on about how easy it is to start your own company. It's disingenuous. They only tell you that so they can sell you some, some class that's all yours for 5 installments of $299. And that's not what I'm trying to do. Okay? I'm trying to give you the truth. Some people think of that as discouraging. I want to prepare you. I want to prepare you for what's going on. Okay? I don't think that you could start a fashion business in 3 easy steps. I don't. It's a lot more complicated than that. Here's the thing though, is if you fail at something that everyone swears is so easy to do in 3 easy steps, that's so damaging to your psyche. And ultimately, I want to prepare you mentally and emotionally for what you're getting yourself into so that you get into it prepared. Okay? And yeah, if you have tried a business venture and it didn't go as well as you had hoped, try again. Research, learn more, try again. Okay? And as you try, keep these 5 things in mind. Number 1, you need money. Anybody who tells you, oh yeah, a couple grand, you can figure it out, do it yourself, it's just clothes. If you want to import a bunch of already made t-shirts and then send it to a screen printer and get your artwork printed on a bunch of t-shirts, yeah, you don't need a lot of upfront capital. But also, I don't consider those people fashion designers either. You have to at least design a t-shirt and construct a t-shirt that is special, with special fabrics, with something about it that is special. Okay? One of my top pet peeves about fashion is when people say, oh, my stuff is elevated basics, but they can't tell me what's so elevated about them. The vast majority of people who start their fashion brands do not make patterns well enough to do patterns for their own brand, if at all. Okay? In particular, if you have a more complicated product, you want a professional pattern maker with lots of experience to develop your product. Okay? If you have a degree in fashion design and took a couple of pattern making classes, that's not enough to put together a professional pattern. Yes, geniuses abound. I'm not talking about the exceptions. I'm talking about the rule. Okay? And you're going to need sample sewers, because my guess is, unless you've been sewing since you were a kid, your sewing, if you know it, is still not going to be good enough for professional samples. So you have to hire people to do all those things, okay? If you don't know what a tech pack is, you're probably going to have to hire someone to do your tech packs. You're going to have to hire someone to do your sales, your PR, your marketing. So depending on how many skill sets you have going into this business venture, you're going to have to hire the rest, and that costs money. And there's no one out there who can do all of it, well. You're going to need to hire contractors, freelancers, part-time people, all that kind of thing. You like my mug? It's my new mug. You want one? So yeah, you need more money than you think. Number 2, you need more education than you think. Yes, again, I'm targeting those start your own business in 5.5 easy steps. I'll show you how with 4 installments of $17.99, and that is $1,799. Okay. So you don't have to go to fashion school to start a business, because who are going to show your degree off to? Nobody. If you're trying to get a job in corporate fashion America or corporate fashion, you're going to need a degree, okay? Those resume scanners are set to look for your BFA in fashion design, okay? So it's very difficult to get a job at a big company. You might have an easier time getting in with someone you know at a smaller company who kind of knows your work experience or whatever. But if you want to just like jump off and start working in corporate fashion, then you're going to need a degree. But to start your own company, you don't need a fashion degree, okay? What you do need is some education, okay? Just because you don't need a degree doesn't mean you can just start willy-nilly without knowing anything. That's not how any of this works. You can't go into business in any sort of sector without having researched that sector. And the more complicated, the more steps in a company there is, the more you have to learn. Case in point. I get a lot of people who contact me who develop these ideas for their fashion brand and have no knowledge of fabrics. Sometimes people show me a bunch of sketches, but they don't have fabrics. And they have this sort of general idea as to what kind of fabric they're going to use. But it's clear from when they describe their sketches and they're like, so in this one, I'm going to use this and I'm going to use that. And I'm like, that's not going to work. And I'll tell them construction wise, okay, I try very hard not to push my design aesthetic onto other people, but construction wise, it's going to be very difficult. It's going to be very bulky, or, that fabric doesn't have enough structure to hold that shape that you want, or it's going to be so heavy. Like, I don't know if that's good for summer. Like all these considerations that are not aesthetic, but all about logistics of construction. Honestly, I talk to fashion designers and they're like, how do people just not have the fabric in front of them to design? Because first of all, it is very helpful to have the fabric in front of you and let it inspire you with the way it moves. Okay, you'd be surprised at how interesting it is to just look at the texture, play around with it, feel it in your hand. So even when you are doing a project for a portfolio and you only need a swatch or two, I still recommend people get like a half yard at least, so you can like play it around with your hands and like throw some rows of stitching and look at it if you try to pleat it. Or if you try to gather what that looks like, how much it fluffs up. Some things are going to be really thick and structured. And so when you gather them, you're going to have like really distinct poofs, as opposed to something that's really soft and wilty, like a chantilly lace that's just going to collapse. Okay. I was watching this really cool TikTok of this woman who had taken her mother's wedding dress and was basically upcycling it for her own wedding. And she had just taken out one layer of tulle in between the top lace and the lining fabric. And she was showing how the whole skirt moves so much better without that tulle. Like, these are things you have to learn, and you learn that by playing with the fabric in your hands. So even if you are not at the machine sewing these things yourself, I did a sewing video last week and it was kind of embarrassing because I'm not a great sewer. And it doesn't really bother me that much, but it is kind of like, haha, you guys, I'm not good at sewing. But it's not about how immaculately you sew. It's about how you think about how these things come together, how the fabric works. And, recently had this conversation with the designer who was working on a new collection. And she's like, well, I think that one's going to be this fabric. And I'm like, but she hadn't sourced it all. She didn't know what was out there available to her. She didn't know if she was going to be able to find the fabrics in her color story. Like, there were all these things. And so, if anything, you need fabric education. Okay? With fashion designers, you can never know too much about fabric. Once you've been working for a long time, and let's say you work in a certain category of fabrics, like the first design house that I ever worked for, that that brand only ever worked with silks. Okay. And so she was so good at silk, Duchess satin, four-ply crepe versus regular crepe versus satin back crepe, and mousseline and georgette, organza, chiffon, like crinkle chiffon, all these things, right? She didn't know much about anything else. Not that it really mattered because that was her niche, that was her category, and that's what she needed to learn. So whatever that is for you, learn everything about it. Just because you don't need a degree doesn't mean you don't need an education. Number 3, you don't know what luxury looks like. I hear a lot of people talking about how they're going to work in a luxury price point, how their brand is going to be a luxury price point. And most of the time, you do not know what luxury looks like up close and personal. Okay? You observe it on the runway, which hides a multitude of sins. You observe it in photo shoots in glossy magazines, which hide even more sins via Photoshop, careful styling, lighting, poses, the whole 9 yards. And you haven't stepped inside a Louis Vuitton, a Gucci, a Chanel, a Dior. You have not actually gone in and taken a jacket into the dressing room, turned it inside out, checked the stitching, what beautiful stitching looks like. And here's the thing. You cannot rely on just one brand's quality and one trip down Fifth Avenue, okay? Because a lot of people, this day and age especially, where everyone is buying fast fashion, everyone just assumes that your average consumer doesn't really know what quality looks like. And so they slack now. And some brands do this, some brands don't. Some categories do this, some categories don't. Because you have to keep in mind, a big house like Louis Vuitton, their products are being made by multiple factories, kind of who specialize in specific garment categories and fabrications and techniques. And so you have to look at a lot of things, and you have to get a feel for, if you want to sell your dress for $800, you have to go look at a lot of $800 dresses. That's not even a luxury price point. I'm just giving you an example, okay? 800 is closer to contemporary, like high contemporary. So if you want to sell $800 dresses at Neiman, Saks, are they merging? They're merging, right? Neiman Marcus and Saks. I don't know what they're going to call themselves now. You have to go look at a lot of $800 dresses so that you get used to that quality. So when you get your samples in, you expect your $800 dresses to be of similar quality. Here's the thing though, $800 coming out of a big brand versus $800 coming out of like a nobody's heard of you brand are going to be different, because the resources available to the big brand and the volume discounts they get at the big brand, that $800 dress costs less for them to make. It was easier for them to make. And so you really want to be looking at $800 dresses that are very small brands that not a lot of people know about, and check out their quality. But yeah, go look at a lot of $800 dresses. Go look at them in person. Okay? Because online shopping, you can't see anything. You can't see the stitching. You know, those photographs are taken specifically to get you to buy it. So they're never going to show you a loose thread. They're never going to show you sloppy overlocking. They're never going to show you any overlocking, really. Like, how can you have an $800 dress with, well, I wouldn't put overlocking on an $800 dress, but whatever, okay? But you need to go look at these, whatever price point, you need to go look at them. You can't just be like, oh, I'm going to be a luxury powerhouse and not know the quality. But I see that happening a lot. Number 4, you think that creative endeavors mean you do not have to worry about proof of concept. Okay, proof of concept is something that, entrepreneurs think about a lot. Proof of concept, like, does my idea have legs? If I tested out a beta with a bunch of testers, do they love it? Is it working? What can I do to fix it to make sure that my customers in the future are going to love it. But the second it becomes a creative endeavor, people think that they do not need proof of concept. When I start talking about market research and talking about who your ideal customer is and what they're buying versus what you hope they're buying, and like they shut down, it's like, you're stifling my creativity. Listen, I want y'all to be creative. I do. Okay? There's too much boring crap out there, and I want you to make cool stuff. Okay? My tagline on all my social media is like, teaching for a better fashion industry, and I'm very close to just changing it to stop making shit. Shit meaning like junky junk and just too much stuff, period. Just over production. Okay? Double meaning. All right? But what I mean by it's junk if only you think it's beautiful and nobody else buys it. Okay, this is fashion design, not fashion art. If you want to sell fashion art, my channel is probably not for you. Okay, I'm not kicking anyone out, but I am addressing fashion designers. And fashion designers should figure out solutions for dressing the world. Okay, and I know there are designers where it seems like, oh, they're just doing the most beautiful of things possible. Things that don't look like they have much commercial value, and they're just putting creativity out there, like Robert Woon, Miss Sohi. Like, yeah. If you want to develop like that, you have to reach the furthest, highest echelons of creativity and beauty. If you're going to be doing kind of more everyday clothes that people wear, it's not really a matter of whether or not you like it. It's a matter of whether there's a market out there who's looking for your product, or it's just some kind of nerdy journey that you want to go on yourself. Nothing wrong with nerdy journeys. I love a nerdy journey. I do things that y'all don't know about because it's just stuff I don't think anybody else is interested in. Number 5. It's always convenience over control. Okay? There are going to be a lot of people out there who are like, oh, you know what? I'll do that. Don't worry about that. I'll do that. Okay? Factories who are like, oh, you need fabric? I got you. I can source for you. And they probably have some deal where they get a cut and you have to pay that upcharge because somebody else sourced it for you. But then at the same time, it's like, yeah, you are actually paying a sourcing fee because you didn't go do any research yourself. So there is that. But now you're only limited to the things that factory knows about, has access to, and can cut a deal with. So now your window for available products is much smaller. Okay. And, if a factory's like, oh, yeah, we can do your patterns for you, that's great. Here's the thing. If you don't pay for your patterns, then you don't own your patterns. And so if you want to go to another factory and get your blouses made there because you don't really like this factory's quality anymore, they get to keep the pattern because you never paid for it. Convenience over control. So a lot of the time what happens is sampling is done closer to the designer geographically, which is why there's a lot more sampling in LA and New York. That's why, instead of moving all the sampling overseas, some design houses choose to do sampling in LA where there's more room. It's a little bit cheaper than New York, but it's still not 12 time zones away. It's more like 3 time zones away because all those time zones can really slow down communication. The closer someone is geographically, the more control you have because you can stop by, you can check in, you can touch base, that time zone thing again. And yeah, for all those things, you have more control. Of course, everyone knows that it's cheaper to produce overseas. So once all the details of all the sample iterations and everything are sorted out, then maybe you go overseas. Okay. And so it's always going to be a balance of convenience over control, convenience over creative control, convenience over logistics control, creative over IP, intellectual property. Okay. Who gets to own it? Okay. Do you have your pattern maker across town from you? So you two are developing the patterns together and the style, and then you send a copy of that pattern to your factory. So you're controlling the look, you're seeing it be developed before your very eyes. So always thinking like balance out creative versus control. Okay. And yeah, some things you're just going to be like, you know what? F it. Just you take care of it. I'm tired. There's always going to be those moments. Sure. I got you. I have also felt that way. Honestly, like when I was writing my book, it was like, do I self-publish? Do I try to find a publisher? And then a publisher contacted me. So I was like, okay, this could be good because then I don't have to do X, Y, and Z. I don't have to learn InDesign to lay out my own book. I don't have to edit my own book. I mean, of course, I did some editing, but like fresh eyes who are professional editors, I mean, that's best, right? So, yeah, it's always a balance between convenience and control. Do not let someone just come along and be like, I'll do that for you. I'll do that for you. I'll do that. And after a while, you're like, whose brand is it anyway? That's what I got for you today. If you want to know more about the ugly truth of opening your own fashion brand, drop me your questions below. Drop me your video requests below. Please thumbs up this video if you learned something new today. I'll drop a link to the mug in the video description if you want one. And I will see you in the next video.